Donald Trump has announced that his term is ending and the transition will be orderly. As far as we can tell, this is Trump saying he's lost. It's over. I'm sure there will be people who say that, oh no, he's just alluding to the fact that there will be an orderly transition to himself. No, come on. Trump is saying his term is ending. Yesterday was absolutely insane, and it was insane for many, many reasons. I don't think it accomplished anything, but I don't think any of this is about accomplishing anything. I think yesterday we just saw raw anger from a lot of people, and I've been warning about this. You know, the left likes to say that my predictions are wrong because they'll choose the ones I get wrong. And now I have many on the right saying I was calling this for a long time, and I have many on the left blaming me for it. But let me make some things clear. Violence doesn't work. What happened yesterday is damaging and effectively ended any fight Trump could have had. And I've been warning about this. Trump needed legitimacy. It's fifth generational warfare, which means we're focused on morality in the hearts and minds of the people. And that is, and that those victories come through media and through propaganda and persuasion. Trump was able to succeed in becoming president because of persuasion, but you can see how they reacted to it, to his presidency. Well, yesterday accomplished nothing but persuading people that things had gone too far. However, the left is already fanning the flames, and I believe that we are now going to see a dramatic escalation worse than anyone could realize. I'll make something clear for you, and then I'll read these stories. Look, Pence has announced Joe Biden's won. Trump has said his term is ending, but we are seeing fierce escalation. The FBI is now seeking tips on anybody seen inside the building. And I assure you, the ideological opponents of the Trump supporters will be doing a tremendous amount of internet sleuthing. Let me make something clear. I said this all throughout the past several months. The reason why we needed to have a court hearing on the merits, the reason why I said the Supreme Court should have taken the Texas lawsuit is because people need to feel like you're listening. They need to feel like they actually had a fair chance. It might not have been successful. It may have been a court hearing, and then after they lose, the Trump supporters say, we refuse. But we did not get a ruling on the merits. There were some, okay, this is true. There were some, like in Pennsylvania when they talked about observers. It was the Trump team saying observers were being barred, and you have something like 680,000 votes that nobody was able to actually track. And the court was basically like, how do we respond to that? What would you have us do? Maybe there's something in the future. However, many of the claims, especially as it pertains to the voter registration databases, the change of address databases and their correlation, things like that, there's never been proper adjudication or a ruling on the merits. None. They've been rejected. In Nevada, I believe it was just tossed out and the judge refused to even look at it. When Trump supporters hear that, well, they feel like they have no voice. They're angry and there's nothing else they can do. It's what desperate people do when they're desperate. And that was the warning I've been giving all along. I said from the get-go, I did a video the day after the media called it for Biden, and I said Republicans should actually be pretty happy. They defended the Senate pretty well, and they won across the board in state legislatures, which will give them the House in 2022. So it was actually a fairly crushing defeat for Democrats, except for the presidency. Well, now we know, for a variety of reasons, the Democrats have won in Georgia, and now the Senate will be controlled by Democrats, the executive branch and the House. And we are going to see, I don't want to call it necessarily a steamrolling through by the Democrats of policy, because you'll still have people like Joe Manchin. But it is going to be particularly crazy. I'm not entirely sure they'll pack the Supreme Court because they don't have the strength to do so. So we'll consider that a correction on any past or previous statement I said where I assumed they would. When it was brought to my attention, you had people like Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Then you realize the Democrats do have the majority now with Kamala Harris, but Manchin is now effectively the most powerful politician in the federal government because, you know, he's a moderate Democrat and he's only going to side with Democrats so far. So it's not going to be the apocalypse, but it's going to get pretty serious. I'll tell you what will bring about the apocalypse. CNN, MSNBC, these pundits saying that, you know, truth and reconciliation, insurrection, saying just fanning the flames. Cori Bush, Congresswoman, now in on her first term, I believe, saying that what the Republicans did for defending Trump was treason, and that she was going to pass a draft a resolution, which I believe she already has, calling for their expulsion. Don't you understand where this all leads to? The Democrats and many on the left aren't stopping everything that brought us to this point. Angry Trump supporters who feel like their voice is not being listened to, who feel like they have no chance for redress of grievances. And then they storm the Capitol, and then a woman dies. In fact, 4 people died yesterday. I think it was stupid. I don't think it accomplished anything for anyone. There was no strategy. But I've been saying, strategy is irrelevant when you just see blind rage. I say the same thing about Black Lives Matter and the leftist protests. It's just blind rage. They're not going to accomplish anything, and that's been my biggest criticism. What are they doing, and why are they doing it? Non-violent civil disobedience is effective. Violent protests, be it smashing windows or storming the Capitol or burning down buildings, does not accomplish what you think it will. You know, I see people saying like, oh, but the Boston Tea Party and all that. You cannot compare hundreds of years ago to today. We are in the information age. It is a battle for the hearts and minds of the people. We cannot expect to see ground war like we used to because, I mean, truth be told, it's kind of cool that we've gone beyond that. It's now about persuasion and giving someone a good argument and making and presenting good ideas. What we saw yesterday actually hurt all of that. So let me tell you what's going on with Trump, and we'll read this, but I'll stress this point. Trump was defiant to the bitter end. There were objectors who were standing up for him. There was a call to pause the electoral certification for 10 days. Some were speculating that Pennsylvania, Wisconsin were on the verge of decertifying. I'm not convinced that was true, but let's assume that you did believe that. Because of what happened yesterday, now they're calling for invoking the 25th Amendment, impeaching and removing the president, and Trump himself has said it is the end. That would not have happened if there was just a standard, boring electoral joint session. Storming of the Capitol hurt Trump in unimaginable ways. And that's it. Now, my fear after this is the escalation from the left. So let's read. From ABC Eyewitness News, the AP reports, President Trump says his term is ending. In a tweet from Dan Scavino, he says a statement by the president. Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th, Trump said in a statement. He added, while this represents the end of the greatest first term in presidential history, it's only the beginning of our fight to make America great again. They say Trump on Wednesday had encouraged his supporters to march in the Capitol to protest lawmakers' actions and later appeared to excuse violent occupation of the Capitol by the mob, which forced its way inside, clashed with police, and ransacked offices. Trump called for a protest, and he had his event on the Ellipse. That's it. What we're seeing now from the pundits and the leftists, the tribalists, is that Trump encouraged, incited, and so did the Republicans. That's the absolute danger I see. Trump didn't do that. Trump had his event. We had Jack Murphy, who was there. We had him on the show last night, the IRL podcast, and he said it sounded like a concession speech. Trump was saying sometimes it takes more courage to do nothing. And I've been saying for some time, it feels like Trump is trying to wind down the tensions among his supporters, and that we're seeing these fumbles and stumbles to keep everybody from, going nuts, like they were drawing things out. But it doesn't matter, man. The rage is there. Well, aside from Trump saying it's over, Pence announces Joe Biden's victory after Congress completes the electoral count. It's the most important thing out of all of this, I suppose. That's it. That's the news. They say Congress had to recess for nearly 6 hours because of the mob. But at 3:40 a.m., President-elect Joe Biden had won the presidency after Congress completed the counting of the Electoral College votes. What was largely seen as a perfunctory last step before Mr. Biden's inauguration had turned into a day of chaos after the mob. Joe Biden is now legally, officially president-elect. It's that simple. I mean, the media wanted to jump the gun, and that was the problem. It's so annoying and frustrating. I call it a slow motion car crash. And I'm sitting here watching it, yelling at people, move your car. You're going 5 miles an hour and you're going to give it some time. You're going to crash. What are you doing? Reminds me of Austin Powers. You ever see Austin Powers? When the guy in the steamroller is like 150 feet away and the guy's screaming at him and he won't move. That's what it feels like. That since the election, we've known exactly what we need to do to prevent chaos and de-radicalize and de-escalate. They won't do it. It's a bloodlust. I mean, the things I was hearing from CNN, they're not news. You know, I spent all last night with Luke, Jack, Lydia, and Ian, and we're talking about calming people down, de-escalating, violence being wrong. And what you hear from CNN was just, it's Trump's fault. These people are insurrectionists, terrorists, insurgents. And what do you think that's going to do? You know, I said this a long time ago. If somebody does something wrong and you don't like what they're doing or who they're associating with, you need to encourage them and give them the opportunity to do right. And then when they do something good, you thank them and offer them forgiveness. You know why? If you tell them there is no forgiveness and we will give you no quarter, then they're going to say, I will seek it with whoever will grant it. What happens then is those who are doing things you don't like will find like-minded people. If they treated Trump supporters and Trump with dignity and respect and opposed him, and then he lost, but welcomed Trump supporters to come in and have the discussion, they would feel like their voice was being heard and they would have a chance to actually associate and communicate. But the same is true for the left. Or I should say, I should rewind what I mean by that, clarify. The left doesn't want them to come in. The Trump supporters would absolutely have these conversations. So the issue is on the establishment, the mainstream media, and leftist publications who are refusing to allow people a chance to speak. And when they do, they mock them. It's derision. Take a look at this from Newsweek. 45% of Republican voters support storming of Capitol building. I understand the anger. I absolutely understood the anger of Black Lives Matter. And you know, to play into the cliche, I'm from the south side of Chicago, as if I wouldn't understand anger over police brutality. I complain about it all the time. I understand the anger here with what's happening in Washington, D.C. It's why I stopped voting, because I felt like it was pointless. But I'll tell you what makes things worse. Storming the Capitol. And somebody died. All that did was give the left everything they wanted to fan the flames and make it worse. And now I think with Joe Biden about to become president, we face some very, very serious ramifications for what happened yesterday. They've been talking about truth and reconciliation commissions, military tribunals. Now they have their excuse. Joe Biden's going to come in and say we need to hold accountable those who encouraged or instigated this rebellion, this insurrection. And they're going to go after every single person who was in that building. I wouldn't be surprised if they go after people who are just outside the building. And many of the people who went in, some of them journalists, doesn't matter. They are going to lock them up and throw away the key. Why? Because no one seems to understand how you stop this. Apparently, I'm the only one. Well, that's not true. You've got people like Majid Nawaz, who I quoted the other day, and he's making comments about this right now saying, he understands de-radicalization better than anybody. His history is quite incredible. He was actually involved with terror groups. And then now he's a presenter on the radio in London, an amazing success story. He gets it better than anybody. And he's saying similar things to me. We need to sit down and listen. We need to apologize, even if you don't think you did anything wrong. We need to come together. Otherwise, it's only going to escalate from here. So 45% of Republicans, what does that amount to? 30 million people. 37 million people. Okay, well, about 35 million, because it's 45, not 50. That's how many people voted for Donald Trump. Not all of them are Republicans. Sure, fine. So let's say of the Republicans, which I think is probably like 30 to 40 million registered Republicans. It's gone up. Let's just say 10 million. Let's say 15 million. That's how many people support this. That's kind of scary, don't you think? That's a lot of people. Yeah. So what happens when they keep pushing this stuff? I can't show you this next tweet. I can't show it to you. It's a radio host, apparently for the LBC, advocating for violence. I was going to show it, but I can't. YouTube will probably take this down. calling for violence against the people who stormed the Capitol. And then a woman was shot and killed. And it's horrifying, man, when I watched that video. You see the life drained from her eyes. And she was a combat, I believe she was a combat vet. She served 4 tours in Iraq or Afghanistan. I'm not entirely sure. She was climbing up on the window, and there was Capitol Police, and he shot her. And I can't believe he did it. There was no reason to. This was just, it was a couple hundred people doing something dumb, but I'm not surprised he did. And I don't think it's entirely his fault. This is a guy who's, seeing people bang on the doors, smashing the windows. They've barricaded it. Now they're going to break in, and they don't know what's happening. But I tell you, when you break into a secure facility with armed guards, this is what will happen. I'm sad, man. I'm sad to hear it. And 3 other people died due to medical emergencies. Some of the reports are that, people may have fallen. One individual may have fallen from a great height because they were climbing scaffolding. I'm not sure how the other people ended up losing their lives, but I'll tell you one thing. Over at the New York Post, they say madness storms Capitol. It's time for America's center to stand strong. And they're right. They talk about, a lot of people are bringing this up. Not only did we see widespread riots that result in around 30 deaths, we saw David Dorn rushing in to defend his buddy's pawn shop, killed live on camera. And regular people, America's center, were mortified. And what did the media do, and what did the left do? They said it was peaceful protests. They downplayed the violence. MSNBC, I believe, they had a guy standing in front of a burning building, just flames 50 feet in the air, and he said it's a mostly peaceful protest, outright defending all of this. Cuomo on CNN said, "Who said protests have to be peaceful or whatever?" And which got us the famous ramen guy. It's right there in the First Amendment, Mr. Cuomo. You just got to look it up. That's what the mainstream media was doing. But worse still was the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where 3 people were shot and killed in a hailstorm of bullets. Well, 2 of them. It was a hailstorm. One person, it was like a drive-by. It was 10 minutes of shooting hundreds of rounds into an SUV from some kids who were apparently joyriding. And we were all shocked and mortified by this. The next thing we saw was in Portland, a Trump supporter walking down the street minding his own business when an avowed anti-fascist, an Antifa, yelled and put 2 bullets in his chest. And that man died. His name was Aaron Danielson. And now, once again, it is a Trump supporter who is dead. But what does the media do? Once again, they blame the right. They will accept no fault for what they've done. And I can only imagine that means the people on the right will not accept what is happening now. Of course they won't. How can they? The double standard. The Democrats get away with it. The way we described it the other night was they control cultural institutions. The I believe Daily Wire is now doing movies. Incredibly smart. That's your path to victory. Developing culture. Making good content, having fun, and inspiring and encouraging people. This is 5th generational warfare. The way you win is by proving to people that you are morally just or right, and being good to them and inspiring them and having fun and making them smile. It's one of the things that the right had been particularly good at for some time with memes. But because the big tech and the establishment shut down many of these voices, it resulted in people just snapping and going off. The path to success right now is building culture and helping the economy recover. Things like what David Portnoy is doing, where he's helping small businesses during the COVID lockdown, and certainly calling out these issues. But this is why I said I want to start a vlog, and we're going to be doing music and stuff, because it's one thing to just, we can't just sit here and be negative and complain all the time. Anyway, look, I digress. To this day, I have not seen any apology from the establishment over their encouragement and incitement of what happened with the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd protests. If anything, they are still adamant it was the right move. Think about how insane it is that Trump supporters have one major event, and it was drastic. It resulted in Trump supporters dying, and it's the worst day in human history or in American history. They're saying the Capitol has not been breached since 1814. Come on. These were American citizens. This wasn't a foreign adversary invading this country. But I look at what happened with the left-wing protests in June, and those rioters killed innocent people. Or innocent people died in the riots. Some innocent people were killed, like in the Chaz. And we don't get any of this. It's going to get worse. And I don't want it to. I want to go back to playing video games. I want to go back a year ago talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie. I just went and watched Wonder Woman 1984 and didn't like it. I was really bummed out. I thought it was a movie. I don't think it's the worst movie in the world, but it was whatever. The popcorn. You sit there, you watch, you roll your eyes at the end, and there were some plot holes and stuff. Why can't I want to go back to just hanging out and talking about cultural politics? I don't know if we can recover. I don't. Take a look at this from Cori Bush. She tweeted, I believe the Republican members of Congress who have incited this domestic terror attack through their attempts to overturn the election must face consequences. They have broken their sacred oath of office. I will be introducing a resolution calling for their expulsion. Heaven help us if she succeeds with the Democrat majority in the House. I don't think every Democrat would support it, and that's why it probably would fail. But if she succeeded, Republicans being expelled, I don't think it could happen, but the fact that she's even saying it is the crazy thing. Because this is when Republicans start to say, see, it's not about politics anymore. They're still trying to just seize power and crush everything. You want to know, I think there's an interesting question that needs to be had as well. Where were the police? Where was the security system? Where were the walls? How did this happen in D.C.? I guess you could say that Trump wanted it to happen. Maybe some people, when the people started storming the Capitol, Trump said, this is what happens when you have this landslide taken from you. Never, go home in peace. Never forget this day. And I'm like, that is basically saying you get what you deserve to the system. And that was wrong. But I don't think Trump gets it. Trump's been flopping and floundering for quite some time. He's done some good things. I didn't support the guy up until mid this year. And not even mid this year, to be honest. I think it was August. And it was mostly having to do with critical race theory and war. But you look at where he's at now, and Trump should have immediately come out and said, no, shut it down. Because I don't think he realized how much it was hurting him. Trump supporters don't realize how much Lynn Wood was hurting them. And Trump supporters, the most ardent, got mad at me when I mentioned Lynn Wood was hurting him. But I was right. And here we are. But here's the issue. You'd think with all of the dramatic escalation and riots and violence over this year, especially, that security in D.C. would have been quite extreme. They brought in the National Guard. They were talking about fears of violence, yet they only had a single line of Capitol Police guarding the barricades. And there's a video where Capitol Police opened the barricades to allow the people to come up to the Capitol building. That's mind-blowing. Why would they do that? Well, there's two ways you can look at it, I guess. A complete and total failure of police and security in D.C., or they wanted the Trump supporters to come in and do it. I think many Trump supporters believe that it was intentionally lax, and I think the left think the cops just support them. But I'll tell you what, there's a video where, as they're storming the building, someone takes a selfie with a cop. That's right. They were helpless, and they just got steamrolled. And they're taking selfies with people. I have to wonder how something like this happens. The police were fighting with people. A woman was shot and killed. So I don't think it was for lack of trying to stop them. I think it was at some level they didn't prepare for what was very obvious. To be fair, I had been saying even up until yesterday afternoon, I did not think Trump supporters would do anything. I did not. Because they mostly just walk around and wave little American flags. This time, a bunch of people did. So I was wrong about that. I was. I've been talking about an escalation of conflict, civil crisis, whatever. But I didn't think Trump supporters would go and do this. I really didn't. And they did. So today's going to be an interesting day. Trump said it's over. That's it. It's the end. But it's not the end of what's been happening in this country. It may be the end for Trump's presidency. But what they're doing in the media and what they've been doing for some time has led to this moment. Everything that happened that caused Trump to get elected is not stopping. It's getting worse. And I give you now one final thought, a really fascinating article by the Daily Beast. The GOP's replaying the conspiracy that predicted Rome's fall. It's really interesting. They talk about Catalina, probably pronouncing it wrong, Catalina, Lucius Sergius. Apparently, he tried to stage a coup when he lost. And 3 years later, Caesar, who had seen it all go down, feeling that the system had become corrupt, felt that he must take over. They're saying that this is what's playing out. Trump is not Caesar himself. Why, he's in fact Catalina, who lost an election and then marshaled a raggedy coalition uniting oligarchical senators, lower-class Romans, and foreign leg breakers to stage an armed uprising and overthrow the existing ruling clique. The Catalan conspiracy was less an ideological movement or a revolt motivated by real material disposition than naked self-interest writ at large, according to historian Mike Duncan. It was also farcical, poorly planned, and badly executed. Catalan's faction was easily defeated by the consul or executive Marcus Tullius Cicero. The failed Catalan conspiracy echoes in 2021, not because it destroyed the Roman Republic, but because it exposed how rotten the foundations of the Republic had already become. Julius Caesar was elected 3 years later. After witnessing Catalan's hastily improvised failure firsthand, Caesar laid his own plans far more carefully. So it's not going to stop. We'll see what happens today. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.